Do you remember where you were during these significant Gen X moments? Grab a drink, grab a snack, and let's go back. Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of Gen X Unfiltered, the podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back.
Hey.
Hello.
Hello.
Feels like it's been a while. It really hasn't, but
No.
it just feels like it has. I don't know why. Today, like the title suggests, we are going to talk about 5 of sort of, at least for our sake, significant moments in Gen X. But it's going to be like, do you remember where you were when you heard about
these things
happened?
happened?
Yeah.
Sort of like for boomers, the JFK assassination.
Yeah, like my mom knows exactly where she was, what she was doing when she heard, like that kind of thing. So we know that there is a ton of significant moments that have happened over the decades, but these are ones that are sort of most significant and ones that we can accurately say, like, we remember where we were when this happened.
Yeah, because that's the thing, there's a long list of things you could probably peg if we wanted to. Trying to some of the biggest ones we could think of.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna do our top 5.
Okay.
All right, ready? We're gonna start
with
number
5.
All right.
All right. So I'm just gonna give the date: January 28th, 1986. Challenger explosion.
Oh yes.
That was a big one.
Yeah.
I remember.
We were like little. I was in grade 1.
Yeah.
But here's the question. So, I mean, I guess really quickly, I mean, most people of our era or older have definitely heard of the Challenger explosion. They still talk about it today.
I would think so. Yeah, there's just a documentary within the last year, maybe so, on Netflix, maybe 2 years ago. I don't remember now, but they did a really good in-depth dive into the whole thing.
And I think that it was so significant because it was so hyped up because it was the teacher, the civilian that was going up there. And she was like a beloved teacher that, you know, was a part of the community. And she had been nominated to do this. And it was televised live.
Yep.
And everybody saw it on TV.
Yeah. It was crazy. Like, I didn't see it, like, in my classroom on a TV, but I remember, like, when I went home, like, it was all over the news.
Yeah.
It was everywhere. And, like, the same thing, like, the big thing was the teacher who was on board. It was like, you know, super sad because on top of that, we had a civilian, you know.
It was supposed to sort of, you know, it was supposed to be this sort of feel-good story of, like, this, you know, non-astronaut background, you know, going up to space for the first time. And
so her name was Krista McAuliffe. I didn't remember that until I read it, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, I recognize that name now. And just really quickly, so the explosion occurred 73 seconds after liftoff. I always thought it was faster than that. 73 seconds, like, that's a long time to be watching and being like, yay, it's
long enough to be like, you know, I remember, you watch the footage replay where it's like, you know, they're pretty far up there where it's sort of like, okay, it seems like everything's going fine, and then all of a sudden it's just like, boof.
Well, and like the crowd watching, you can see them all. They're just like, oh, and like, of course, you're seeing this happen, and you're not really processing, so people are kind of just like, what just happened?
I think, you know, there have been multiple shuttle launches, so you know at some point the rockets kind of come off of it and stuff like that, so it's like, is this part of it? Is that what's happening now? Or they... I don't know what you call that term, but
the separation between the shuttle and the tanks.
Is that what's happening here? And that's, I think, because people didn't really know.
It was the failure of an O-ring seal is what caused that.
Yeah.
Okay, so quickly though, Steve, do you remember when you first heard about it, or where you were when you heard about it, or any memories that come up when, you know, we talk about the Challenger explosion?
Yeah, I don't remember we watching it in school or that, but I definitely remember coming home and hearing about it and just kind of being like, because I remember beforehand, like, you know, obviously my parents were watching news and stuff. I was pretty little, but like hearing about it and seeing that, you know, this was this huge, you know, there's a ton of publicity around this launch. So I definitely remember that, but actually watching it, no, I don't remember that at all.
Well, I think I'm just quickly reading our notes, but I think, again, another reason why this was so significant, because it was a teacher going into space, schools were broadcasting this live in their classroom.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole thing. Like schools across, definitely across like the U.S. But I do know people, you know, up here in Canada too that were watching it live.
Yeah, because it was like a teacher, so you know, it was like a good learning thing for kids. But space and
because you know, space travel, going to the, you know, was still is like, you know, a newer thing, like especially back in the 80s. Like, you know, it was not, you know, they didn't do it all the time. I don't know how many launches they had done between them, but like it was still relatively new.
Yeah.
You know, I know the space shuttle too, because it was, you know, the design of it and going back and forth, and you know, there's lots of hype around that too. It was
okay, Eric. What about you though?
I think like I said before, didn't watch it in school, because like my school was like a little bodunk school in the middle of nowhere, but we didn't have a lot of TVs to watch it on.
Oh my gosh, where were you going to school? In like the backwoods?
Yep.
I
was homeschooled by a den of bears.
Oh, lucky.
Yeah. But then I remember like the lead up to the launch though, because it was in the papers, the same thing like Steve was saying, like the teacher.
Yeah.
It was a really, really big deal that there was a civilian going up into space.
Yeah.
And then the horrible accident happened.
So I have a really specific memory of this, which is so weird because, like I said, I was 6 and I'm old AF right now. So that's many years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember I was in grade 1. And it's funny because when I even talk about it, I can picture like blippets in my mind of what things look like. It's weird. And I don't know exactly what time this happened at. So I don't know if this was live information I was getting or replay. But I went home for lunch. And we always watched the Flintstones because it used to be on 12 o'clock at lunchtime.
Oh, yeah.
I remember that, yeah.
And so we went home for lunch, and I remember being at home for lunch, and it was on TV. Like I said, I don't know if we were watching it live or if it had happened already, and then whatever. But I remember watching it on TV, and as a 6-year-old, I didn't really get it.
You're pretty young to clue into what has happened.
But I remember my mom was sad about it. Like, she was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And she was kind of like upset about it. And then we went back to school, but it's also kind of one of those, not the situation that happened, but it's also one of those really Gen X things that people always say, like, we all witnessed the Challenger exploding and we all went back to school like nothing happened. We didn't have counselors talk to us, but literally seeing 7 people perish on TV.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing too. People, you see it and we realize, like 7 people lost their lives in this thing, and like,
So it's just kind of a humorous little thing that people were like tough kids because they just sent us back to school.
There was no like in school counselors to talk to.
No. They just turned the TV off and were like, okay, let's go back to
back to math,
back to whatever class you're in. Yeah,
but it is definitely significant, at least like I don't know the names of any of the spaceships or if they're like the whatever mission, like I have no idea, but Challenger I always know when they say Challenger.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, sadly that was the like they've had a couple of incidents since then too, right? Like the space shuttle now has been retired, and like now it's like you got like third-party companies flying up to space and stuff like that. Like you just realize like it was going to space was still super dangerous.
Well, I mean, it is. I can't even. Space is like the ocean to me. It's one of those things that I understand is there. I understand there's planets. I understand all that, but I can't understand it. It's such a foreign concept.
The concept is too hard to grasp.
Well, it's just the size of it.
I just don't. It's like the ocean. I mean, I get the ocean. I know what it is, but like how much is undiscovered, it just boggles my mind.
Oh yeah. You realize you always sort of hear these new, they discover new planets or new things going on in space, and you realize they just know it, like they're looking like a fraction of what is out there.
Yeah, basically, like from scientists now that they think there's like space is vast and there's no end.
Yeah,
but see, and that's what makes my head hurt. Like it has no end. I can't even comprehend what that. Like I know what that means, but to comprehend
to wrap your head around it,
it's like what? What do you mean it has no end? How can it go on forever?
I don't know.
Yeah,
like
no,
it's not. It's a weird. Space is.
It's not like there's like a boom, you hit a wall that's into space.
No,
yeah,
and like,
there's not like a. Yeah.
I always I find it fascinating. It's just so like. I can't wrap my brain around it.
Yeah, it is very. I do find it fascinating. I don't know much about space and stars and constellations, but I do find it is interesting.
Well, we
had fascinating at times.
We had a very famous astronaut in Canada, Chris Hadfield.
That's right.
Oh,
yeah,
he was the biggest higher-playing astronaut.
Did he live? Yeah. Was he on the space station for like a year?
It was a long time.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. Being up there for that long,
But he was so popular here when he was up there. Like I think, don't quote me, but I believe that because it was only a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it could have been like 8 years ago by now.
Maybe a decade now, but
I think because it was such an educational thing for students and stuff. Like I believe he was even like, students were communicating.
Yeah,
with him,
yeah. He was doing all sorts of stuff. Yeah. He seemed like a very personable guy too. Yeah. So kind of a good personality to be a face for it, because it was all over that. He would be on the news and stuff like that. Yeah,
guy that came down in the little capsule in the water, because I think I watched that on television.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're going off track. Eric's looking at me like, next.
I'm ready for the next one.
Okay, but discussion, Eric. It's okay.
I know.
I'm just kidding. All right, number 4. This was super significant. The O.J. Simpson Bronco chase. I mean, how can you not have that as part of significance in your history timeline of craziness? I know we've discussed it a little bit before on one of our previous podcasts, but this time we're just going to we don't even need to rehash what happened. All you have to say is O.J. Bronco chase, and I don't care who you are, you know what it is.
This was the event that popped off the whole O.J. Simpson murder trial.
Exactly.
Yeah, that whole thing was just like a crazy circus. And yeah, that Bronco chase was everywhere.
So here is my question, Eric. I will start with you this time.
I'm ready.
Do you remember? Well, let's just do the date. June 17th, 1994 was when this all popped off.
Yeah.
So, Eric, do you remember where you were when you heard about this?
I was at home, and every single channel switched over to the O.J. Simpson Bronco chase.
But do you remember what you were watching?
What I was watching, I think I was trying to watch, like, I don't know, some stupid, like, wrestling American Gladiators or something.
Oh, poor you.
Anyway, something stupid like that, like in the 90s. And it just changed over to this O.J. Simpson car chase. It was like breaking news. O.J. Simpson's being chased by the police on this LA freeway.
Did you watch it, though?
I was flipping the channel trying to not watch it.
Oh my gosh, you are so not like into life events.
No, I just wanted to watch my stupid TV shows. I was like a kid. Like, I didn't care.
You weren't that young.
Well, not that young, but maybe I was an immature person.
You weren't like 6.
No, I wasn't 6. I was a teenager.
All right, Steve, what about you? What memory does it spark for you when you hear that? Like,
I definitely remember watching it, and I don't remember what I was watching, but I definitely remember being in my parents' basement sitting, and they had this old brown rocking chair that was like the chair to sit in, and just, I remember whatever I was watching, also was just everywhere. But especially back then, it was a little different because there was only a handful of networks. It wasn't the 5,000 channels now.
Yeah.
But it was, I think, pretty much every single channel was showing it.
That's what I mean.
Like, it was everywhere. It was crazy.
So, again, I don't know if I'm weird and have these significant memories around these moments, but I remember exactly what I was doing, and I remember where I was going the next day.
Oh, wow.
I was in my bedroom, and I had this little black and white TV that my parents had, and was that the black and white TV or a TV I had bought myself with my paper route money?
Fancy.
It was a little TV, whatever.
Whoa.
And it was in my room, and I was watching something on TV or whatever, and it was the morning because I don't think I watched it live. No, because it would have been the night before, so it must have been the next day. I turned on the TV and they were talking about it.
Yeah.
Or maybe, who knows? I have the timeline wrong. Either way, I remember seeing about it, and I was going to Canada's Wonderland. And I was mad because I had to leave the TV to go to Canada's Wonderland, and I wanted to see what was going on.
It must have been the next
So it must have been the next day.
Because it would have been in the evening here, because it was like...
Or I was watching it live and going to Canada's Wonderland the next day. I don't know. I mean, it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I was such an opposite kid than you, because I would have dropped, like, O.J. Simpson TV like a bad habit to go to Canada's Wonderland.
I was like, I think that I blame the O.J. Simpson fiasco for sparking my whole, like, obsession with, like, true crime and like police videos.
Well, that whole trial. I mean,
I
know we did a podcast on it, but that whole O.J. Simpson story was crazy. How big it was, and like the Bronco chase was just kind of the cherry on top in terms of like the buzz and the focus and the hype and all the questions around it. Like, it was crazy.
Well, here is. Okay, so this helps my timeline a little. It said it lasted about 1.5 hours, and it had ended around 8 p.m. LA time. So it would have been like 11 o'clock our time.
Yeah, we're 3 hours
So I must
behind.
have been watching it live and going to Canada's Wonderland the next day.
Probably, yeah, you must have been, because it would have been in the evening. So,
but I remember being in my room. I remember what my room looked like. It's weird. I don't know why I can't remember what I ate for dinner last night, but I can remember. I think I'm just visual, like sounds and
Well, I mean,
like
it was a huge thing, so it definitely, one of those that kind of sticks in your mind for sure. But it's crazy,
I was obsessed and never stopped.
Yeah, well, that was the thing, because it was everywhere. For the next 10 months or 16, however long it was from the trial to.
Yeah. All right, the next one, number 3. This one is it's Canadian, but it hit like North American media big, so most people have heard this. Before we talk about this one, though, just really quick trigger warning. We're going to be saying some words that might trigger people. We're talking about death and all that kind of stuff, so just be careful when we're talking about this next one.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to say Paul Bernardo.
Oh my God, that was such a crazy...
That was intense.
Crazy summer for everyone here who was, around that age in Canada.
Yeah, what was that, like 93?
Well,
93, right?
Really, really quickly, I'm not going to go through a whole list of everything, but so I'll just say the names of the victims because that kind of makes the time for us. So Leslie Mahaffey was in 1991. Kristen French was in 1992 in April. So Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French were two of the girls that were the victims to Paul Bernardo. He had many more, but these are the two significant ones that kind of sparked the whole, like, what's going on in Southern Ontario or the GTA. Now, where we live, we were right in the center of it. Leslie Mahaffey was from where we live, the city we live in, so it was very big news here.
Yeah.
But I don't remember it being. I only really remember hearing more about it when Kristen French went missing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the best, definitely, because I think then they realized, hey,
there's something weird going on.
There's a pattern here.
This is not just a one-off.
Yeah.
So Kristen French was in April of 92, and she was in the Niagara region. So Leslie Mahaffey lived in Burlington, was found in Niagara. Kristen French was from Niagara and actually found in Burlington. So very close to home, like very close to our backyard.
Very close. Yeah. Like I remember that vividly.
Well, so just really quickly, okay, I'll start with you then, I guess. What's your sort of, when I say that, like when you go back to first hearing about it, where were you?
Yeah, I remember obviously the one thing I always remember for some reason with that, I remember being in my parents' backyard cutting the grass with helicopters flying overhead and stuff like that. And like I remember my parents being really scared because my sister was like the same age as these girls.
Yeah.
So I remember my mom and dad being really worried about my sister and her friends because they were the exact same age as them, and obviously living in the city where all this was kind of happening.
It'd be terrifying as a parent.
Yeah, I remember my parents being super worried.
Yeah.
And I mean, our city's not big.
No. I mean, 100,000 people, especially, that many years ago. Yeah, it was probably just over 100,000 people.
No.
But, yeah, I remember my parents being super scared. I don't know why. I always have this memory of cutting the grass in my parents' backyard and seeing helicopters flying overhead and stuff like that, and just kind of realizing what was going on. And then hearing stories from people, too, because it was all over the news. Obviously, they were looking for a specific kind of car and all this stuff. So you hear stories about, like, people saying, like, oh, we think we saw this, or this person was here or there. And, yeah, it was nuts.
What about you, Eric?
Steve hit on it, the car. I really remember, for me, it sticks out. They're looking for a cream-colored Camaro, which ended up being the wrong car.
Yeah, that's we should do a whole podcast. Ooh, we should do a whole podcast.
Yeah. But I remember this, like, on the news, like, the local news, CHCH, was like, we're looking for this cream-colored Camaro. We think this is the car the suspect drives. If you've seen this car, please report it to the police immediately. And I remember that being, like, all over the news, everywhere. All over the papers.
Yeah.
You drive through Hamilton, there was billboards that had a picture of a cream-colored Camaro. It says, have you seen this car? Call, if so, call this number, right? Like, and I remember that being, like, everywhere.
Yeah, so it's sort of the same thing. I remember I always feel like it was summertime, but it wasn't really, because she went missing in April and she was found like 2 weeks after that, so it wasn't summer, but for some reason I always think it's summer. But I remember the same thing as Steve, like every day there was helicopters, not only just like police but like news helicopters.
Yeah.
They were just everywhere. And it was also really impactful because Leslie Mahaffey was from Burlington. She was a couple of years older than us, but she had a younger sibling, and like, again, where we live is not a big city. There's only so many schools. So people knew her knew her brother who knew. And it was just so, and especially just the whole way, and again, Leslie Mahaffey, she went home, her mom locked her out because she was past curfew, went to the corner, used a payphone. Paul Bernardo was trolling the streets and
just happened to
be like, you want a cigarette? And she went, okay. We're talking about 1991. Like, it was different.
Mm-hmm. Oh, totally.
But sort of along Steve's lines, like, I was a couple of years younger, but my mom was petrified.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I didn't live in like the Burlington area when I grew up. There was no curfew, was there?
No, I don't think so. But it was just this air of like,
because I thought maybe like to protect like the youth of the cities in that area in the danger zones, they might have put up a curfew or some sort of protections.
I mean, the thing was is I was young anyway. Like, I mean, I was only like, what was it, 1991? I was only like, I don't even know how old I was then. But I mean, I wasn't old enough 12. That I was out till 11 o'clock at night anyway.
No, you were like 12, 13.
Yeah. But I remember because we used to walk to the corner store to get like Slurpees, and that was it. No bueno.
Yeah. No. I remember all these things. And I just want to clarify because we kind of didn't, I don't know if you want to sort of explain who.
Paul Bernardo.
In case people don't.
Well, so Paul, I'm just trying to keep it a little like not heavy, but Paul Bernardo, we'll just say it. He had aliases. He was the Scarborough rapist and the schoolgirl killer. He killed 3 girls that we know of that he was convicted of, one being his wife's sister, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
And he was a serial rapist in Scarborough before he started murdering.
And some of the people in America might know I know there's a document, they call them the Ken and Barbie killers and stuff like that.
The actress from that 70s show played her.
That's right. They did a movie about
But then there is an actual documentary with all their home videos and stuff.
Yeah.
So we watched that too. But another thing is that, interestingly enough, when he went to trial, again, we need to do a whole podcast, but when he went to trial in Canada, there was a massive publication ban. Newspapers, TV, they weren't allowed to report anything that happened in court. So Canadians were going to Buffalo to get the news. So Buffalo was not advertising, but talking about it everywhere.
Yeah.
They were watching it on the TV. We knew nothing about what was going on.
People would go to Niagara Falls, New York, or Buffalo, New York, and like buy papers and stuff like that, and then bring them back for people because there was a publication ban. So
no idea what was going on.
I actually had a teacher, one of my history teachers, actually went to the trial once just because it was, obviously you just seen it and stuff like that. I guess it was just interesting. I actually went and sat in court for one day to listen to.
I would have.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was huge. Like it was, it was scary. One of the.
It's still terrifying. You hear his name, and even though we were young, like we were 12 years old or whatever it was, like it's still such a, like I go right back to that time and that fear that the whole community felt, and it was just terrifying.
Yeah.
I
remember seeing like images of him coming out of like the vehicle going into like the courtroom and stuff, just getting like chills because his eyes were so like lifeless and just like, this man's evil. Like,
well, you still see him now every couple of years. He'll pop up on the news because he's trying to get parole or something like that. So there's some videos of him, and you hear about him. I think he got attacked.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But so every so often he'll pop up in the news for something or other, and it's just you kind of.
Now, interestingly enough, he was in Kingston Penitentiary, which is our oldest penitentiary, right? Oldest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, oldest penitentiary that closed years ago, but he was housed there. That's where like most dangerous criminals would be.
That's where because we don't have life sentences up here in Canada.
We have 25 years is life, and then if you're a dangerous offender, you can stay in prison forever.
Yeah, so he was labeled a dangerous offender.
But he's still eligible for parole.
Yeah, so every
whatever
10 years or whatever it is, I don't know, he'll pop up for parole again, and then they had to go. And it's hard because the families are like,
the families have to go
every few years they had to go through this again and again, and it's crazy.
I don't know much about the Kristen French situation. Leslie Mahaffey, like I said, it was more here because it was in the city we lived in. But I mean, it understandably so. I mean, I don't know how you can ever, but like, it just destroyed that family.
Oh yeah, because the circumstances of everything is just such a. Both of them are really sad, but it's just a very, like you sort of touched on that, she was out past her curfew, and it wasn't the first time, so the mother locked the door, so she had to ring the doorbell and probably get grounded.
Yeah.
Well, the mom just said, you're not coming in, you're past curfew.
Yeah, and so she just said, okay, no, I'm not going to do that. I'll go down to the store and call one of my friends and crash at their place, and
never happened.
She went to that phone, and then he happened to be driving by or whatever and saw her, and just, their fates kind of crossed paths that night. It's just
really
crazy.
Quickly to sum it all up, if you, again, just to kind of like why it's so like memorable for us, I guess, is that like, you read the books, and I've read numerous books, and like the places that they talk about him driving, because he was a peeping Tom too. He used to live in people's houses. Literally streets that like were beside streets that we lived on or knew, like that's how close it was. Hotels that were like it was insane.
No, I mean, it's weird. I still drive by certain spots in the city, and the store where she made that phone call, it's still there. The phone is still there.
Where Kristen French was found.
Or where she was found. It's like, you drive by that spot, and it's just like every time.
I have
like,
goosebumps.
No, it's just like, my God, I can't believe that this happened here. Like, it's still hard to fathom, and it was just such a crazy time. And luckily, thankfully, he got the justice I think he deserved.
Well,
should have been a little different, but at least he's behind bars where he deserves to be, and I don't think he's ever getting out. So
no.
I mean, again, that's a whole podcast story, but if he ever got out, he wouldn't last very long, I'll tell you that much. No way. But whatever. But it's just huge, and I think, like I said, it was, how many years was 1991?
Yeah, a long time ago, but it's still, and it's still, like I said, every couple of years he pops in the news, and it's still a massive news story. Like, it's just something.
It's really, even just sitting here talking about it, it's so crazy to me how close, like, that all was.
No, and that's what I'm saying. Like, it was literally in our backyard. Like, like when you think about it, like, it is nuts that it happened, like, literally, like, a stone's throw from where we're sitting right now.
They talk about streets that he was caught in backyards of, and I'm like, whoa, that's 2 streets away from where I live. It's just crazy. Yeah, but anyway, we could go on forever, but
it's really hits close to home.
Definitely deserving of its own podcast, I think.
Oh yeah, and especially as Canadians, where
yeah,
we're lucky that a lot of this, there's not a ton of the stuff that pops up, thank God, but this was one that
hit close to home.
Yeah.
All right, so we are on to the number 2 top moment that we remember where we were when it happened.
Yes, one of the
So this one actually kind of just came when we were discussing sort of the top 5 moments between us and kind of coming to agreement on them. This one I wasn't even thinking of until I think it was Eric mentioned it, and then it was like, oh my gosh, all these memories popped up. So for us, it was Operation Desert Storm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a massive one too. I definitely remember that.
The first war in Iraq.
Yeah, seeing all the footage and stuff of that, like that was.
And then as soon as you said that, it takes me right back, and it's the most random memory that I have of that. Like I know exactly where I was when they dropped the first bomb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where were you?
Oh, yeah, I guess. So just really quickly, because I didn't know, but January 17th, 1991 was sort of the first day of it or whatever. I was out with my family. 1991 again, we were young.
Yeah.
I was out with my family. We were at, I don't know, it was a video store. Blockbuster, maybe.
Like a Blockbuster type place, okay.
Yeah.
And we were looking for videos, and it wasn't very busy in there. And they had like TVs or something in there playing.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we were looking, and I didn't know what this meant. All of a sudden we were looking, and one of the workers there yelled out, they dropped a bomb. And I remember my parents or my dad being like, oh my gosh. And I was just like, I had no idea of what was going on or anything like that. And I was so scared because I thought it meant here.
Yeah.
That bombs were happening here. And I remember freaking out and like just being like that. I can feel the feeling. And
like your flight response kicked in.
Yeah, because I didn't understand what that meant. I had heard nothing about it before. But my dad was just like, oh my gosh, we got to go home. Like, and so he wanted to go home to watch it. I was just thinking like, holy shit, we got to go because there's bombs dropping.
Yeah.
It's so weird that as soon as you mentioned that's the memory that popped in my head. What about you, Steve?
Yeah, again, it's one of those things I just remember being in my parents' basement watching TV in that same brown chair and just the footage, that like night vision footage that was on like CNN or whatever. I just remember that and just kind of like, oh my God, like what is going on here?
Yeah.
Because, I think there must have been like stuff in the news about like, the tensions and Saddam Hussein crossing in and whatever.
But do you remember hearing about that before? Like when you saw the war happening or that it started, did you understand what that was? Like what was happening?
Like my parents, it's always funny when I look back, like my parents would talk about a lot about, like my parents always read the news, they had newspapers and would talk about that stuff at dinner, because back then we actually had dinner every night.
As a family,
Yeah, most dinners we would sit at the table with the 4 of us and so that stuff would come up. So I definitely knew what was going on.
Okay.
Probably not super
No, but
involved,
you understood,
but at least knowing that,
was,
there was something was bubbling over there. And but then, yes, I remember, I don't know why, but I do remember watching CNN.
Oh, yeah.
And that was too, like, because CNN was still, from what I remember, was like, from what I remember, I was still kind of a newish,
Yeah.
So, like, it was just all over it. And then, obviously, they had, like, reporters live there.
Yeah.
Broadcasting. I just remember that, like, grainy night vision footage of seeing, like, the Scud missiles or whatever coming in and all this stuff. And just kind of being like, oh, my God. Like.
What about you, Eric?
I remember all of it, like, the build up to Desert Storm. Yeah. So, before Desert Storm was Operation Desert Shield. Oh. And that's when the U.S. moved in to protect the Kuwaitis from the Iraqi invaders.
Yeah.
So that was the whole buildup. Was like the U.S. was over there. They had set up their Patriot missile defense system to take the Scuds out.
Yeah.
And this was a lot of buildup. And then I remember it was like build up. It was like, is this going to happen? And then suddenly on CNN they're like, it started, like the invasion's happened.
Yeah.
And like you were talking about, they had that the night vision video.
Yeah.
And you saw these rockets going up in the air and exploding and stuff.
Yeah.
And that was the start of Operation Desert Storm.
Yeah.
So same thing. I remember like being like in my parents' living room and like we had CNN on and it was just like, oh my God, there's a war just started.
Yeah.
And like I admittedly even now as I'm reading the notes, like I don't know a lot of the details. Like you saying that stuff, like I had no idea there was that operation beforehand.
There was tensions for a long time. But,
I mean,
I shouldn't say a long time, but before Desert Storm, there was a month of tension.
Usually, wars just don't, like everybody's happy and then they drop a bomb. Like usually it doesn't happen that way, right?
No.
Obviously there's build up, but I just I mean, I'm sure my parents talked about, I just didn't know. Like I said, when they said they dropped a bomb, like my parents instantly knew what that meant. Me, I'm thinking that they're like and even then I remember as it was going on and watching the TV footage, I still didn't quite understand. I knew it was happening over there, but I didn't understand that we were gratefully safe where we were.
Yeah, it really was, it was just far away from where we live or in the U.S. And so, it's completely on the other side of the world.
But it was just a weird thing for me to understand. And I always was just so nervous about it. And like I said, as soon as you say that, I always just think about that person yelling at the top of their lungs, they dropped a bomb.
Yeah.
And it was just terrifying.
I remember being totally different than what I expected, like the footage.
Yeah.
Because my dad was a big war buff, so we could always watch like those World War II documentaries where they had like footage from the war and stuff.
Yeah, like,
and same with the Vietnam documentaries, all that stuff. So I thought it was going to be like more like that kind of coverage.
Yeah.
And it was totally different. So I was like shocked. I'm like, this war is really happening, but it was totally different than what I thought I was going to be
seeing. Like the frontline stuff where most of this was like they were in the hotels, kind of embedded in the cities and like
It was just very terrifying. I mean, even now, like,
it was scary, because I mean, like, Canada was over there in the war fighting too, right? So it was like, people at my school, like, they had older brothers and sisters were like, are they gonna have to get like recruited to go to war?
Well, because that was the thing too, because we are, obviously being allies with the U.S. It's like, how are we gonna help them? Are we gonna send people over too, or whatever?
Yeah, exactly.
And I remember my parents having conversations about that. Like, I'm assuming it was that because obviously that was sort of the biggest. Well, I'm not going to misspeak because I'm sure I'm wrong, but I'm just saying I remember my parents talking a lot of stuff like that. And again, in the moment, they were probably talking about regular stuff, but my memory being a kid, like I remember thinking like my dad had to go to war and stuff. I don't know. It was so weird. I feel like such a dumb kid.
Well,
but I was so scared
as a
of
kid,
it.
you don't really know, when you're a kid, so you don't know all the nuances of what is actually happening. It's just like...
It probably would have been a good moment for my parents to actually sit down and talk to me about what's going on. Instead, I just lived and probably
you lived in this like fear in your head.
And it probably explains my anxiety today. But it's just, it was terrifying. But it's a very significant moment, and it's hard to believe it was like 1991. That's crazy.
Yeah, and then all the, because then after that, there's the conflict and all that stuff that's been going over there for years, and then, like, because then you look at, like, then that kicked off and died down, bubbled up, and then with George W. Bush and. There's
so
a whole
lot
of history and stuff that's gone since that point.
Yeah. But that was definitely a significant moment where I remember exactly like where I was when I heard about it. Yeah,
just like I said, every time I think about it, just in my head, it's just that footage, grainy night vision footage. It's kind of just picture that and see that, and then the
terrifying
the big old CNN logo and like the voices just
how scared I was as a kid, like, and I mean, even outside of my own brain not realizing it, but I was perfectly safe, thankfully. I mean, again, all those people who weren't safe, terrifying.
More it's a scary thing, and you just gotta salute and thank you to the people, the brave men and women that go over there in the front lines that are putting their life on the line for us, for freedoms, for Canada, US, for everyone.
All right, we're going to go on to the top moment. Before we give this one away, really quickly in the comments, take your guess on what it is, because, I mean, I don't know. I can imagine there being... I guess I shouldn't say that, because everybody has their own moments. But, I mean, this was such a moment that I don't know how you... Yeah. Anyway, can you guys guess what number one is? Well,
as soon as we help make the list.
Up with the list. All right, I'll just say it's September 11th, 2001.
9/11, yeah. That's still one of those. It's kind of like a marker in history before or after 9/11. That's still a reference a lot.
It's a milestone. A lot of things changed after that.
So I mean, I was 21.
21-ish, yeah.
21-ish. So we were old enough to like I think you were living in your own apartment and like we're in school, whatever the case may be. So I mean, we definitely have like more current memories of it.
Clearly remember it vividly,
I definitely don't think I need to give any explanation as to what 9/11 is. I mean, especially any Americans out there, like you guys all know. We don't need to go into that. We mostly just want to talk about sort of where we were when we heard about it, how, like, just what memories pop up when you say 9/11. Eric, go ahead.
So I was in university when 9/11 happened, and I remember, like, vividly, like, waking up and just kind of getting ready for my day, and then, like, a friend of mine, he just ran to my room, was like, a plane flew into like the World Trade Center. I was like, what? So we had a common area where there's a TV, and we're going down to the common area to check out what was going on because this is crazy. Like, and at the time, no one knew like was this like an accident, like how this plane hit the World Trade Center. And we're going into the room, and then like not long after, the second plane hit, and we're like, oh my god, this is like this is serious. This is like a real big deal that's happening right now. Like, this is an attack.
So did you like go to class, or did you guys all just watch it all day?
You know what? I'm trying to think. I don't think I went to class.
No,
to be
there's no way.
No, I don't. I remember like just being, everyone was just glued to the TV in the common area. No one went to class. And I remember like they had a moment of silence like in the cafeteria. Yeah. We all went down for dinner in the cafeteria there. And there's a moment of silence they had for all of the victims who lost their lives.
And at that point, nobody even really knew how many there were.
No, exactly. I remember people crying. I was like, oh my God, this is like, just such a tragic event. And like,
yeah. Well, and I think because, again, a tragic anyway, but like we all saw everything happen on live TV.
Yeah.
Every like first plane, second plane.
It was totally shocking to see that plane hit the second towers. Like, just kind of like, holy shit.
I mean, to me, the towers crumbling was the most just like.
Well, that was
what?
Absolutely insane. Yeah.
All right. What about you, Steve?
Yeah, I was sleeping, and I had someone call and wake me up because I was working. I'd graduated college and was working my first full-time job. I was working afternoon shifts. So I'd finished working the night before. I was working like 3 to 11, so I was asleep. And someone called me and was like, "Hey, turn on the TV. This plane just hit the World Trade Center. It's like super crazy." So I turned it on, and then same thing. I was watching it when the second one hit, and it was just, I don't even, what to make of it. I was like, what the hell's going on? Like, this is insane. Mm-hmm. Then I had to go to work that afternoon.
Well, luckily you work somewhere where there's lots of TVs.
Well, I did. I worked in a television studio.
Yeah.
And I remember going in, and one of the girls I worked with was crying because she had a cousin that worked in the World Trade Center, and they didn't know what was going on there, so she was freaking out.
Oh, my God.
Then people were worried, too, because,
What was in Toronto?
We were in Toronto in a broadcast center, so it's like, could we potentially be a target or something like that? Because I remember some people saying, like, we could, because we could broadcast their message if they wanted. So no one knew what was going on.
Well, it was just so much chaos.
Well, even the fact that, like, people were watching it live where I worked, and like the second that the towers collapsed, a whole bunch of stuff went down because they were picking up stuff from the World Trade Centers.
The television network.
So as soon as they dropped, it was like, seconds later, all of a sudden stuff started going off the air because, obviously the transmitters on the top of the buildings were going down. So yeah, it was just crazy. So I watched it obviously all morning. Then I had to go to work and then just watch it all night. It was just.
It was like weeks of just.
Oh yeah, but just. You couldn't really just comprehend what had just happened, and the amount of loss of life and stuff like that. It was just like, what the hell is it going on?
Because then it's like, well, what's next, right? Like, there's going to be retaliation here, right?
Well, that's the thing, too. And then that's like, what, is that it? Are they done? Like, and it's crazy. But, like, when they locked down the airspace everywhere, like...
Can I tell my story first?
Yeah, sorry.
It's fine. Because what you just said was really good because Canada was a big part of that. I just wanted to... I was driving my car to work, working my first full-time job after school, and I was listening to the Howard Stern show on the radio because back then it was on regular radio.
Yeah.
It wasn't on...
He was on terrestrial radio in Canada for a little bit.
For a little bit. He got kicked off the radio pretty fast.
And I used to, because I lived with my parents, so I would leave work like half an hour earlier than I needed to leave just to kind of like drive, and I'd go park down by the lake and just chill before I went into work.
Yeah.
And, I lived with my parents. I wanted to just get out of my house. Mm-hmm. And I was listening, because I'd listened to Howard Stern, and I was pulling into work, and he was on air, and he was like, oh my gosh, the blah, blah, blah. And again, I obviously clearly was not a well-versed person in world affairs, because I was just like, at that point, I remember him saying like, oh, it's a little propeller plane or whatever, right? Because people didn't know.
Well, that was the first plane no one knew. And I remember thinking this when I turned it on, thinking it was
like an accident.
So I went into work, and I wasn't really thinking much of it. I was just kind of like, oh, okay, whatever. And then some people I worked with, they had a TV on, and they were playing it. So I wasn't really connecting the dots. I was just like, whatever. I went, because back then there was the internet, but it was like news internet. There was not a lot on there.
Yeah.
And I remember trying to go on the CNN website, and I couldn't. It was like, completely
log jammed.
Oh, it's
log
probably
jammed,
overwhelmed.
right?
All the,
Yeah.
everyone's
So
trying to go to it.
I was in there, and then my boss came in, and I said, "Hey, this happened," and he's like, "What?" And then he went watch the TV, and I remember we were watching it after like the first plane had hit, obviously, and we were watching it both standing there when the second plane hit. And I remember him saying, and I had no idea what this meant because clearly I just needed more education in world affairs. And I remember him saying, "This was Osama bin Laden." And I was like, I'm not even lying. I'd never heard that name.
Yeah.
I had no idea who that was.
A lot of people hadn't heard that name until all
I
this
had
happened.
no idea who that was. I didn't even comprehend the whole terrorist aspect of it. I was just like, what is going on? And then, it was just on all day. I called my mom. My mom was like, again, like it was just, everybody was just scared. Because at that point, again, remember, like you said, all this is happening. Boom, boom, boom. It's everywhere. It's like, 10 hours away from us in Canada, Toronto.
Yeah.
So people were like, all these rumors were swirling, like, the major broadcasting centers in Toronto were going to get bombed. And like everybody, they sent people home from work, like the train stations closed, like everything. It was just chaos.
And we haven't even talked about the fact that there was other planes too, right? Like,
I mean,
one hit the Pentagon.
Start hearing about all that stuff.
One crashed in Michigan. Yeah.
But I remember my car. I had this I thought it was the bomb, but they make fun of me for it. Whatever, it was a little like lilac colored neon.
The Dodge Neon.
Hey, it was a little cool girl car, okay?
Yeah. Was your first car? Was your first car?
Right, and I didn't love it. It was a pain in the ass and cost me a lot of money, but I love it because it was like I picked it because it was lilac purple. Anyway, that's fine. But I remember that car. I remember what I was wearing that day. I was wearing black pants with a light blue turtleneck sweater, and also I remember because they always talk about it too. But I remember it was like the perfect day outside.
Yeah.
Not one cloud in the sky, perfect temperature in September. It was like, and all this stuff, I just remember everything about that day.
Yeah. No, it was crazy. And then, it was nuts. And like I said, then they started touching on it, they shut down the airspace and all this stuff. Like it was because obviously even the governments and stuff really.
Oh, they didn't know that.
They had no clue what was real.
Yeah. Or did they? I don't know.
Well, that's a whole other conspiracies and stuff like that. But multiple planes hijacked. 4.
Well, at
3
that point,
crashing into the Pentagon.
At that point, they're just trying to make sure nobody else dies.
Well, that's exactly it. They don't know what's going on, so they're just shutting down airspace to get every plane down, and then.
But I
think what you're trying to get to is where Canada played a big part in having some of these planes land, right?
Yeah, Gander, Newfoundland, which is crazy.
They actually made a musical about it.
Come From Away.
Yeah. There's a good documentary on it on. I can't remember where I watched it. If it's on Prime or Netflix, but about the small town in Newfoundland.
So all the planes were, well, not all the planes, but a large significant amount of planes were diverged to this little tiny town. Yeah. Like Newfoundland's not a big province. It's tiny, and Gander, Newfoundland, it's tiny. And they landed all these planes, and the residents of that tiny town just opened up their doors, their beds, their everything to just make sure that these people, because I think it was a couple days.
Well, and not even that. I think it was like, basically it quadrupled the population of that town. There wasn't anything for the people in the plane.
No.
To stay. There was nowhere for them to go. There wasn't hotels or that. It was just like an old military base that just happened to have a runway.
And they made food. It was just, and I've seen the musical. Not a musical fan, but I saw the musical. But no, I mean, it's crazy. Like the Gander, Newfoundland, and when 9/11's talked about it, Gander, Newfoundland still talked about for being so hospitable. And
well, yeah, because like I said, it was such a unusual random place to land these planes, and they landed a whole bunch of 747s and stuff like that. They had hundreds, if not probably a couple thousand people or whatever landing there in this little tiny town that had zero resources for them.
Well,
it's actually a very inspiring story, and despite the backdrop of this horrible incident, that there's still good and kindness in a lot of people and stuff like that.
Like I said, they were opening up their own homes to people. People that had kids with them, they were like, come stay in our house and feeding them. And I remember, it's just crazy.
Because they had no facilities to really, they had some high school gymnasiums, I think, and stuff like that. But that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean.
Yeah. 9/11 is definitely one of those spots that it's a clear before 9/11, after 9/11.
It's funny because I was talking to this girl, and I was asking her when were you born? Because she's younger. She's like, I was born in 2002 or 3. And the first thing I said was, oh my gosh, you were born after 9/11. Isn't that weird? Like, that's the first thing.
Because for us, it's a major milestone, right?
Yeah.
We're like, before and after 9/11. And this girl wasn't even like around for it.
Then it made me feel old. But yeah. But like, but it's like, it's kind of like now with like, COVID, right? Before COVID, after COVID, it's sort of that next marker of a significant event.
I definitely use that now as like a marker for the last, like, things that happened in the last, say, 10 years.
Yeah.
Not even, but it's that 5-6 year mark. Was it before or after COVID? Well, it's sort of like a clear.
You know, it was really crazy to me to realize.
Clear line there.
Yeah.
To realize how much time has gone by.
Because I keep thinking it's like 2 years ago.
Well, from 2000.
4 years now.
9/11 because.
Oh, 9/11. Yeah.
Yeah. No, 9/11 because so every time around the anniversary, they'll do like stories on it and they'll talk to like survivors or families of people who didn't survive, but they talk to like kids that were like kids when their parents died, and these kids are like 25 now.
Yeah. Who were the kids were when they're like 6-7 years old in 2001, and now they're in their late 20s or whatever. Yeah,
there's lots of documentaries on it, and I mean there's lots of like stories of heroes, and I mean the heroes were everybody from first responders to civilians to just everybody just came together to help who they needed to help. And it's just such a tragic it's crazy,
just a very eye-opening and I think it just opened up people's eyes to like what horrible what bad people can do.
I was just so naive to it all. I just didn't know anything about terrorists. I didn't know it was like a thing. That sounds so stupid.
It was the first attack on American soil since Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, and I just didn't even really like when my boss said, "Oh, this very matter-of-factly, this is Osama bin Laden." I was just like,
because I honestly don't remember like the first World Trade Center bombing. I don't know if that was tied to Osama. I don't remember.
I don't think it was Osama, but I think it was terrorism.
100%. I just don't remember exactly who was involved when they did that whole.
I don't know either, and I don't claim to know. But
I honestly don't know off the top of my head. But
just crazy. But like I mean, like we said at the beginning of this, there's 100 other big memorable moments, but these were sort of the 5 most significant that we all kind of like. Almost unanimously brought up.
Oh yeah, there's so many more that we could talk about, and maybe people listening got any other suggestions or topics, drop into comments, let us know.
But I know
I had a couple pop in my head during this podcast.
Me too. For me, these ones all were so significant because, like I said, I can literally remember the moment in time when they
culturally
happened.
And so they're just huge amounts. 100%.
Yeah. But I mean, any closing thoughts? Anybody on those, Eric?
Closing thoughts? No, I think just our last one there, 9/11, I think it really was a massive milestone where you can see like there was a big shift after that. So, that's really it. I think, these things are massive events where we see the cultural and societal shifts.
Well, it's like, 9/11's probably in like history books, but like we lived it, right? So remember when we were in school and we'd read about stuff in history books like JFK and stuff, and it's like, oh, whatever, I wasn't there, I have no idea. Now we're of the age where like the stuff we lived through, like our parents, is now in history books.
Yeah, we can identify more with what our parents went through with
so
JFK.
Weird.
Yeah,
it is very weird. Yeah,
like my mom, like you mentioned JFK, and she can tell you to the moment what she was doing when she heard that had happened.
Oh, absolutely. Like my mom now, I talk to her, like she'll still, it's on Facebook, but I know she'll post about like when Elvis passed away.
Yeah.
Stuff with the Beatles.
Yeah.
JFK. She remembers all that stuff. The Buddy Holly and stuff like that.
Yeah. All right, guys. But like Steve said, comment below. Let us know if you have.
Yeah, absolutely.
I totally forget what.
Let us know if you any other events that we missed or you think we should talk about. Let us know. We're happy to dive into some of these more because it's interesting to go back and sort of discuss these things and get our takes on what you remember, recollections.
And also, let us know your memories of those events. If you have a significant memory tied to those, let us know because I find it fascinating to hear other people's stories of that moment in time.
Absolutely, for sure.
But that's it today's. Sorry, I got all tongue twisted. But that's it for today's podcast. We thank you guys so very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody.
Bye,
Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.